And you're very welcome along to this week's RTÉ Rugby podcast, episode 2 of the new series, and a mixed weekend in the United Rugby Championship for the Irish sides. Leinster scraping past against Zebra in the end, 33 points to 29 after a bizarre comeback in the second half by the Italian side. Cardiff beat Munster in the first game of the Graham Rowntree era, 20 points to 13 at the Arms Park. And then Ulster, big winners in the derby on Saturday evening at Kingspan Stadium, 36-10 against Connacht. Connacht in South Africa this weekend, where they're going to take on the Stormers. But they are going to have all of their frontline Ireland internationals back and available again. Delighted to be joined by Ian Keatley this morning on the podcast. Ian, thanks a million for joining us. You're gearing up for a new All-Ireland League season in the next 10 days or so. Your first season as head coach at UL Bows. How's that all going?
Yeah, well, there's been no game so far, so it's all going well. So I think everything's rosy always in pre-season. So our first game is next week against Nina. So we're well prepared. It's working with a really great group of lads. So hopefully the season follows a good trend.
Is coaching something you had in mind when you were finishing up, or have you fallen into it accidentally?
No, yeah, I always had the kind of plan. When you're kind of a 10 anyway, you're kind of a little bit of a coach on the pitch anyway.
Or you like to think you are?
You like to think you are, yeah. Hopefully they listen to you. But no, the way I see it, I've been in rugby for the last, professionally nearly 13, 14 years, and I kind of have a lot of experience to give. So, but listen, coaching, it's not an easy gig. You're trying to get 40 odd players all on the same page, all have different ambitions, and they all think about the game differently, and they all learn differently. So you're trying to, as a coach, is how do you get your message across to all those players, keeping it as simple as possible, but still being creative at the same time.
And at Bows, do you have any? I mean, this is the research I probably should have been doing beforehand. But do you have many lads connected with the Munster Academy, things like that that are in touch with the provincial setup?
Yeah, we have Evan O'Connell, who is Paul O'Connell's nephew, so he's in the Munster setup now. We have Conor Henchy, who's kind of came up through the rafters. He actually
Captain Crescent, wasn't it?
Captain Crescent, but I think he's just got his Leaving Cert results, so he might be going up to Trinity in Dublin. And obviously we support education first. And then we have Ichi Oji, who's also come out of school from Rossgrave, so he's joined us. So there's a lot of young players who are aspiring to be future Munster players. So kind of getting a chance to work with them on a weekly basis is nice as well.
All right, you're welcome back. So Bernard Jackman has joined myself and Ian Keatley for the remainder of this podcast. And Bernard, before you came on, I was talking to Ian there about getting involved at UL Bows, getting his coaching career up and running. Sean Cronin is another of the recently retired now that's in the AIL. Are we seeing more of the pros going dipping their toes in the AIL after they retire? It's good for the league, all told.
Yeah, no, we seem to be, and ironically, actually, it's coming at a time when there's a shortage of coaches in the domestic game. I think at one stage this summer there was 23 or 24 coaching positions advertised on the Leinster website for Leinster domestic clubs. So it's great to see the likes of Ian and Sean Cronin getting involved. Danny Poolman, the former Connacht fullback, is coaching with me and Bective. And lads really enjoy him. So yeah, no, the more we get the passing on the experience, the better.
And you'd a win to start your season there at the weekend.
Yeah, we win against Monkstown. We last minute try. So look, we take it. You know, you're often on the wrong side of those ones. So got off to a start, but it's very early days, the middle of September for amateur rugby players. Yeah, we haven't had a big pre-season, put it that way. So I'm glad to get off to it.
You know when Birch wins because it's all over social media. If they lose, there's nothing up there. So
well, we'll keep an eye.
I'm gonna try and be more proactive this year and put it out regardless, Keith.
Well, we'll keep an eye on yours anyway, Keith. Come 1st of October, that's the first game against UL Bows of the 2A season. We'll get on to the URC guys because we had a few interesting results at the weekend, and I think we'll start with Munster, just seeing as it was the first game of the new era with Graham Rowntree. And Birch, I think we had, we'd been warned by the coaches for a couple of weeks. Look, it is a process. It is going to take time. You said as much on Monday night when you were chatting on Against the Head. Like, this is this is going to be a process throughout the season. But if you were to look at the game against Munster, or the game against Cardiff at the weekend, how much of the mistakes that were made in that match were individual errors, just poor mistakes on the day from people who should, like slipping off tackles, like we saw Finian Wycherley, for example, in the opening minutes for that first try, and how much then was getting to grips with a new system, just kind of errors that are born out of that. So like how much of those mistakes can be rectified fairly quickly, and how much are things that are going to be worked on over the course of the coming months?
I think they can all be rectified pretty quickly, to be honest. It's just getting time, getting match practice. I think some of the missed tackles were probably just lack of contact fitness for certain players, and that happens. We saw the same, for Leinster against Zebra, uncharacteristic errors, and also the fact that you got new coaches who are obviously still trying to scramble for time. It's for fans, they hear about a 1-1 preseason or a 5-week preseason, and they think that's lots of time. But the reality is, you're always fighting a battle as a defense coach, with your head coach, with the head of S&C, the head of medical, for time on the pitch. And sometimes you win them, sometimes you lose them. And I thought there was a couple of tries, particularly the last try was just an example where, Munster probably haven't spent enough time on their set piece D in terms of understanding their spacing, etc. And you concede 7 points, and that'll all be fixed, So I wouldn't be too worried. I think some of the handling errors probably came, with just lack of understanding of positioning and what they're trying to do in attack. But you could see there was certainly an ambition there to play, and that would be what Mike Prendergast would preach. But yeah, I think Cardiff probably improved a bit. Their first game of the season, recruited obviously quite well, and yeah, just Munster weren't match ready.
Do you think we get a closer idea of what Munster will look like in the next couple of weeks when we have those internationals back on the pitch?
Look, obviously they're going to bring quality, but the problem with the Irish system is, and people don't really recognise this, is that when the internationals who've been on a summer tour come back, their first game is a competitive game, so they don't get those friendly games that everyone else gets. So because of the quality, it doesn't obviously be as noticeable, but it is a bigger ask for them to go. Look, it's an easy fixture. It's probably one of the easier ones on the schedule, but it should be good enough to get through it. But I wouldn't expect them to be at 100% either yet. They need to get game time. They need to come up to speed with what Mike's doing and what Graham is doing and what Dennis is doing, and they've been away for longer. Having obviously been in New Zealand, so it's I think I genuinely believe it'll take till after Christmas before we see Munster, everybody knowing how they want to play and building that Munster DNA under Graham Roundtree, and it's going to be different than it was under Johan.
Ian, do we as the kind of casual fans, do we underestimate the level of rust that players might have in those early season games?
Well, as Bert said, it's a completely new coaching staff, and you're trying to change their habits that have been instilled in them for the last 6-7 years, probably playing under Razzie and under Johan van Grant. So I know Roundtree and Prendergast are trying to install a new way of playing, and you can't just forget the old ways. You still have old habits, which they're trying to do, and as Bert said, you only have 6-7 weeks to do that. They didn't have their full strength squad out against Cardiff, so hopefully we'll see a different performance now against Dragons. But there is definitely a little bit of confidence. They're lacking a bit of confidence. Obviously, they lost their 2 preseason games. Now they've lost against Cardiff, and they're running before Christmas. I just looked it up there. They've got 6 derby matches all against Irish provinces, which we all know they are tough games to get. So they need to get a win or 2, just get a bit of confidence going, and then you'll see them playing a lot more freely then once they get those wins under the belt. But another 1 or 2 losses, and then it's just a confidence thing. It's not through lack of trying. It's not because they want, but confidence is a big factor in rugby, and hopefully they can beat Dragons this weekend. Then they play Zebra, then they've got Connacht, and if they can get a bit of confidence going, then you'll see that attacking Munster come out a bit more that Prendergast is trying to instill in them.
Yeah, and Birch, so they've Dragons this weekend, and look, I know you've had your experiences there and down the years, but it's never a good sign when you see the head coach like Dean Ryan coming out after their game at the weekend and after round 1 questioning the work rate and desire of players after a pretty dismal defeat against Edinburgh.
No, and look at that. When you watch the game, you can see why he was that frustrated. And unfortunately, they've changed a lot of players, brought in a lot of players this summer, decided to spend their money differently. So they've shrunk their squad and they've tried to bring in quality, and they have. They've signed, I think 5 or 6 internationals. So obviously he was expecting something different. Didn't manifest itself on the pitch. Once they went in behind, they down tools. I think it's fair to say, and I think he feels he feels he has to challenge him, because I think the reality is he's under a lot of pressure. There was a bit of player revolt last year, and he moved upstairs. There's a new head coach come in, Di Flanagan from Scarlets. So he's probably looking to get performances and results pretty quickly early in the season to settle everyone down, and that defeat and the nature of it, wasn't a great sign. So I'm really fascinated to see. I think he could probably challenge that group a little bit better, more, because there is more internationals and more experience there. The likes of Rob Evans and Will Rowlands, Ross Moriarty. They're not shrinking violets. So I think he's obviously sensed that. Well, maybe he feels that the coach has done everything right, and it's up to the players to react. But I think if they get a hiding this week, it's a sign that things aren't right there.
Yeah, when you call out players like that in the media, it can either go two ways. Either you get a really good reaction, which I'm sure that's the one that he's hoping for, or you can get the other reaction. So as Bernard there says there, if it goes the other way and you're calling them out in the media, you could lose them quite quickly.
And would there be part of it in the back of his mind then as well, as think, okay, like it's Munster coming to town next weekend as well. They're probably going to have a far more, a far better team. They'll have a lot of their international players back available. They're going to be even better again. They'll probably have something to prove themselves as well after a defeat last week. So there's, it's challenging his players on a number of different levels.
Yeah, no, his job is to try and get them in the right state of mind. And as Ian said, it's a gamble to do that. And that's why you don't see it being done very often. And the reality is, whether it's right or wrong will be decided on the reaction to it. You know what I mean? So has he been able to galvanize the group? Have they had those hard conversations? And are they able to take those on board and react, with a better performance? Or are they fragile mentally? Do they not believe in the plan? Do they not believe in the project? And if they come out on Sunday and put in a tepid display, it's going to be very difficult to go with the carrot approach the week after. You know what I mean? You only really can do that once, I think. And that's why I think a lot of people are interested in his comments. But I suppose I'm not really. I think it's interesting as a technique, but I suppose I'm more interested in seeing the reaction and seeing did it work.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how that all pans out on Sunday. So that's a 3:00 kickoff on Sunday afternoon. That's live on RTÉ2. Dragons against Munster. Friday night we've got Leinster against Benetton. So Leinster coming in after what did the first half of their game against Zebre look like was going to be a pretty comfortable win, and it ended up being just a 4-point victory in the end, 33 points to 29. Ian, I suppose on one hand you have to kind of question. Leinster's defence looked a little bit all over the place in the second half. They looked very, very rusty at times. But at the same time, it's all credit to Zebre, who, when they actually got the ball in their hands throughout that game, looked really, really dangerous and scored some lovely tries.
Yeah, and it kind of happens sometimes. Sometimes Leinster, they obviously had the bonus point win in the belt. They felt, and then Zebre go, right, let's start playing now. And you almost get that freedom. They're like, okay, we've got nothing to lose now. Then they start playing a bit more, throwing the ball around a bit more. Things start sticking. They played a 9-12 out the back 13-10 and a crossfield kick, which you don't really see very often. And it was lovely to watch. But they end up coming away with 2 losing bonus points. But that's just that freedom, like thinking that you have nothing to lose. And if you can actually try and start the game like that, try and play with that freedom, you'd be surprised what you can do. But also with that freedom, with those crossfield kicks, they don't always stick. So that's why coaches sometimes come back and go, okay, we're a bit too loose now. And then that's when mistakes come, and then you concede tries without even doing anything. Well, without even defensively doing anything wrong. So that's why teams get more conservative. But we see there, once that game was over, well, they felt it was over, they started playing with that freedom, and they looked very good, very creative. And it was exciting to watch Zebra play. We just need to see that a bit more often, with trying to play with that freedom.
Yeah, and I suppose the flip side then, Birch, is it's hard to see that level of complacency creeping in with Leinster this Friday against Benetton.
Yeah, and I think Leinster are bringing back a lot of experience this weekend, and it'll be their first time. But I wouldn't be too worried about it. I think Leinster treated that match against Zebra as their second preseason game, and realistically, Leo got 5 points. Okay, there was elements that would concern you, but if you understand how match shy they were, I think you could see, and I think Zebra have improved. Zebra have brought in some good foreign players, and they had a bit more about them. So Leinster would be very impressed by what Treviso did to Glasgow. They've always been the best Italian team for a long time. They had 1 year there where they slipped off a little bit, but in general they've been competitive, and it's home in the RDS, and they'll be looking to put in a much better performance. And I think they will. I think the personnel that's going to play this weekend, plus the fact that they're coming off what they will perceive as being a mixed performance. Generally, they don't have 2 of those in a row.
Yeah, on Benetton then, Ian, one of your former, actually it was the Ian Keatley derby at the weekend, Benetton against Glasgow.
Yeah, there's another one this weekend, Benetton against Leinster. Then, yeah, sure. Obviously, then there'll be Connacht against Munster. There are all these derbies that I've been involved in.
But on Benetton though, obviously, like you had your spell, what was it, 18 months or so in the end, and it was a kind of a good season. There was a bad season in there, and that was caught with COVID as well. Last season, things were quite mixed for them. They finished, I think it was around 13th in the table, and at times looked good. Like it was just very, very inconsistent. But they were very, very impressive against Glasgow the other night, and like fully deserving of their victory. Like, is this a season now where they should be looking to kick on, and if they're knocking around that kind of playoff bracket at the end of the season, like that's a positive upturn for them?
Yeah, I think the big thing with Benetton is they started the season really well last year, but what they need to keep building on, and that's why they tried to bring in a lot of foreign players, is when the Six Nations are on, or the autumn internationals, they lose a lot of those Italian players, and then that's when they really rely on their squad depth. They almost lose half their team, almost nearly 20 players odd to the Italian squad. So that's why they're trying to boost it now this year, bringing in a few more foreign players. Like they brought in Rhino Smith last year, who's probably been probably the league star player. He played incredibly, scoring some unbelievable tries. So they have developed on. It's just to see how well they do actually in that period when they lose all their Italian players, and hopefully they've brought in a few players now during that time that they can still stay strong during that period.
Marco Bortolami stepped up into the head coach role in the last couple of years. He would have been an assistant when you were there, wasn't it? What is he like as a coach and as a character?
So he's very, I'd say, dictatorial. It's his way or the highway, and I think he was, even when I was there, I knew that he was trying to get that head coach job. So he's as I said, it's his way or the highway, which, just like the Dean Ryan comments there about Dragons, it can really work for you if you can get the players in behind you. But what happened last year, they lost 2 or 3 games. Then I knew that, talking to the players, that he starts taking a lot more ownership. He's like, right, we're doing it this way. This is the way it works. And as we said there, that can either go for you or it can really backfire on you. And I think towards the latter half of last season, he lost the players and the confidence went down. Now this year, obviously, it looked like they played some really good rugby against Glasgow, and confidence was on their side. And honestly, talking to those players, I remember we were playing Leinster. They don't have that awe factor. They actually probably wouldn't know half of the Leinster squad. They're very single-minded. They know too. They obviously would have known Sexton or Furlong, but like some of the players that I remember going, oh, who's Gary Ringrose? And like they wouldn't, which kind of actually, like, they don't have that fear factor of like seeing the names on the who they're playing against, and they don't have that fear factor because they don't know who the players are. So they just come out and play, and they have a confidence. That's why they beat Glasgow on the weekend. 2 or 3 years ago, they beat Glasgow at home, and they just go, "Oh yeah, we can beat Glasgow," and it's refreshing, because they approach every match that, "Oh, we can win this."
What would you see as their ceiling, Birch, this season?
I think there's going to be thereabouts for top 8. I think the way the league has gone, so Munster, Ulster, Leinster, Sharks, Stormers, Bulls, probably Edinburgh. Edinburgh spending, I think, 7 million this year, so they should be thereabouts, and are have some good players and have a good way of playing. So I think them. So Glasgow, Glasgow, not based on last weekend, no, they've no chance. But Glasgow, if they got back to where they used to be, obviously they made top 8 last year. Treviso, Connacht, one of the Welsh teams, possibly Cardiff. They all should be fighting for that last 8 spot, and that's might sound a bit negative. Maybe Keats thinks they should be higher, but I think that's given the fact that they lose those. And there's less clashes this year in international rugby, but
yeah,
I think that's probably the height of it.
On Connacht there, you threw them into the mix. I'll touch on their game against Ulster at the weekend. How much of that 36-10 result was down to good Ulster work? How much of it was down to bad Connacht mistakes?
I don't even think Ulster were that good, to be honest, on the night. I think Ulster have a lot more left in the tank. And I think Connacht are in for a very difficult start to the season. Obviously Andy Friend's probably going home at the end of the year, so there's going to be a change there. End of the season, it could be very difficult for them. They finished last season. Okay, they won their last game, but last season petered out quite significantly. They've obviously brought in quite a few players, but I don't see them having the strength in the front 5 now. And you don't have that. Their attack isn't even functioning to the level that it was, a year and a half ago. Because they're more predictable now, easier shut down. But if you don't have a front 5 in the Northern Hemisphere, it's very difficult to get wins. And they'll be really hoping they can catch the Stormers cold. Because I think as the season goes on, the Stormers will be stronger than Connacht. I'd worry about them, to be honest.
Yeah, they obviously lost against Ulster. They've got Stormers and Bulls over there. Then they come home, and if they don't get one of the results against South Africa, then if they're facing Munster, Leinster. So those first 5 games, I don't want to be negative, but you could easily see them possibly losing all those 5 games. But now they are a completely different team when they have their internationals back, the likes of Beal and Prendergast, Aki, Carthy. They need them as much as possible this year, because when they don't have them, they're a completely different team, and they don't fire as well.
Bert, you said there just when you were starting off, you think Andy Friend is probably going to be moving on at the end of the season. Is that what you see his step to the director of rugby role and Pete Wilkins coming in as head coach? Do you see that as essentially the kind of the succession planning for Andy Friend moving on?
Well, look, I think the rumor is that he's possibly going back to Australia. And you could see, like, if you look at Andy Friend's career, he's done an incredible amount of traveling. You know what I mean? And this has been, I think, one of the longest stints he's had. But I'm sure at some stage he wants to go home. I look at it, it's only chat, but certainly that's the talk. And maybe Pete Wilkins has a year to prove that he's the next head coach. And I have no strong opinions on that, but I think, to be honest, they're fighting with an arm behind their back, given some of the squad depth they have in key positions, mainly front 5. I said before, I thought they needed more power, and they lost Papali'i, Sammy Arnold, and Ultan Dillane. So yeah, that's worrying for me, and I think as the league gets better, there needs to be more investment in Connacht to give them the tools to be a top 8 side. I mean, I think it'd be brilliant for Irish rugby to have 4 provinces in top 8. And with Connacht, investing in a new stadium in the near future to be in the European Cup is a massive draw as well. Let's be honest. I'm not sure if Keats played in the Challenge Cup. I did. Unfortunately, it's not the same level, and for fans and sponsors as well, it's not the same. So the investment, that if they could just get a little bit more investment to make them have a realistic chance of being they have a realistic chance to make them more likely to be top 8 year on year. I think that'll be really good for Irish rugby.
Yeah, and like as well as the squad depth, Ian, like there's also the fact that with the format of the URC, they are playing better teams more than some other teams are. You know, they have to play the other 3 Irish provinces home and away, whereas with the way the conferences are broken down, for example, like you look at the Italian Scottish conference where those sides are playing each other 2 times each. Like that is not remotely as difficult a schedule as what Connacht are going to be facing, taking on Ulster, Leinster, and Connacht Ulster, Leinster, and Munster, I should say, sorry, home and away all season.
Yeah, exactly. And Connacht are a bit like Munster. They're playing six derbies before Christmas. And we all know those derbies are fiercely competitive matches. But yeah, but how else do you? It's very hard. How else do you structure the competition? Because it's all based pretty much around that Christmas time that the Irish provinces and the Welsh provinces they don't want to travel away during that Christmas period. So that's why you have all the derbies around that time. So I don't know how else you structure the competition, but it is a little. You can see it is a little bit unfair that Glasgow and Edinburgh get to play Zebra 2 or 3 times a season, and that's nearly 15 points if it all goes well for you.
Yeah, it's a tough one to square. But on one final point on Connacht then, Birch, like this game this weekend against the Stormers in Stellenbosch, moved from Cape Town, but how different do Connacht look, for example, like they will this weekend, with they probably have Bundy Aki in the team, Mac Hansen's probably going to be back, Finlay Bealham, Jack Carty's pretty much the only one of that first choice 15 not available. And then also on the flip side, you've got the Bulls who are missing a couple of key players off away on Springbok duty, like Franz Malherbe, Stephen Kitchoff, Damien Villemse. Like on paper, Connacht, do you think they have a solid chance this weekend?
Not really. No, on paper. Look, no, I don't think they do. I think it'd be a massive scalp, a massive surprise if they obviously have a chance. But would I put €100 on them? No, I wouldn't. I think you have to fancy, any South African team at home bar the Lions at the moment. I think they should be. They learned a huge amount from the early stage of last season, and at the end they were motoring nicely. The confidence they're going to get from having an All South African final, quality of the individuals, and I think, like, I know Connacht last year bounced off a bad result and went down and beat the Lions, and that was a phenomenal achievement for them. But I think beating the Stormers or the Sharks is probably a step too. Stormers or Bulls or Sharks is probably a step too far at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Ian, what do you think?
Yeah, well, all we can do really is all we can base it on is what we saw from the first match against us. That's what we're pretty much basing it on, and based on that, you can't really see them like that travel down as well. Like you have no idea that really takes it out of you. The travel, the time. That's probably your minus a pitch session already in preparation. You're down. You're recovering from not only playing Ulster on the weekend, but you're recovering from a plane trip as well into very unfamiliar like atmosphere and stuff like that. It's tough going to go down to South Africa and to be ready to play a Stormers team, even without those players. It's still going to be a very physical game. And as Bert said, do they have the firepower up front? Because you need to be pretty physical against those South African teams to beat them.
Yeah, that game is 1:30 on Saturday. Stormers against Connacht live on RTÉ2. Birch, Ulster, you mentioned like they probably didn't actually play particularly well at the weekend against Connacht. They're up against Scarlets this weekend, but I suppose we didn't see too much new from Ulster. It was more or less the same of what they were doing last season. But if you were an Ulster fan, would you be taking comfort in the fact that they had a lot of games last season where they were in a similar position heading in late on, and they got really, really wobbly, they got really shaky, and nearly threw away a few results? They did throw away a couple of results in the final 10 minutes of matches. Would you take some bit of solace out of just how composed they were maybe in the last 15 minutes when they could have chucked it away?
Yeah, I think so. And I think if you look at what Dan McFarland's trying to do, he's starting to develop more depth in the key positions. So now he has Herring and Tom Stewart. He's got 2 very good hookers. He's obviously brought in Tamanga Allen. So he's got another tight head on his books. Doak now has a year and a half or 2 years experience, and him and John Cooney, any provincial or any director of rugby will be happy with those two, Madigan and Burns as well. So, and then obviously he keeps developing these young backs. So I think strength and depth will be huge. I think that they'll be absolutely bitterly disappointed about how they lost that opportunity to have a home final by losing to the Stormers in the last minute. But all a coach can do is look to improve, the team tactically, technically, in terms of talent. And I think Dan has consistently done that. So I think they're going to be very dangerous off first phase strike attack. And I think that they have a very good line at maul. I think their scrum can do damage. I think they have enough power as well. When you get like Vermeulen and Timoney, McCluskey on the ball, I think they can play the power game as well and be direct. So I think they're going to be thereabouts. I think they're the next best challenger to Leinster from an Irish point of view, and should be confident that they can win most weeks against the Italians, the Scots, and the Welsh, and obviously being able to win your home games against South Africans, that'll get you to the knockout rugby.
I won't mention Stuart McCluskey because I know you spoke a good bit about him on Monday night on Against the Head, so I don't want to be repeating ourselves too much. One player I do want to bring up though, Marty Moore is. Tell me if I'm wrong or not. I'm confused. Why isn't Marty Moore getting any kind of a look in at international level with Ireland?
Keats.
That's your front row question. No, sir. No, listen, Marty Moore was obviously in the Irish contention, and then obviously went to Wasp, but like he would have been seen there as the next. Like the Irish system always has a plan in place, so they obviously had Furlong and probably more for the future, and then Marty Moore just obviously got a great deal over in Wasp. Went over, didn't really work out. Well, he did. I think he got injured over there, but didn't really work out. And then he came back. So it could be the RFU just going learn a lesson a little bit. Like go back with Ulster. He's playing well with Ulster now, but maybe it is the RFU trying to teach him a lesson. Don't leave the system because it's our way or the highway. I don't know. That could be one of the reasons. But like he's in an age where we're crying out for tight head props, and you've got one up there in Ulster who's doing really well. Like surely he should be on the door, especially now that John Ryan has left he's gone to us. You obviously have Beelum, you have like Porter who's now moved to Loosehead. You have Furlong. Like who's next in line there?
So, yeah, and look, I'll give my 2 cents. Like I don't think it's short termism to be thinking about a player like Marty Moore. I know we're trying to always think long term, and you've someone younger like Tom O'Toole who has a great future ahead of him. But Marty Moore's 31 years of age. He's not an old player by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't know, personally, I think he's been playing some of the best rugby of his career in the last 12 months. He gets on the ball a little bit. He actually looks like he's capable of passing it around. So I think he's able to fit into the style of rugby Ireland have. So I don't know. I'm a little bit at a loss as to why he's completely out of the picture.
Yeah, I think obviously there's been frustrations around his mobility and his ability to have a lot of impact, over the minutes that he plays. But there's certainly never been any doubt about his ability to scrum. And he's also a very good jackler as well. He's kind of a little bit like Dennis Buckley in that, he's very, very effective for his province, but yet seems to be not really favoured in the Irish setup. I think Ian made an interesting point in that, John Ryan leaving, it really does open up an opportunity, because I think, Stephen Archer's been a great servant to Munster, but I don't see him really pushing into the international setup, and obviously Knox Knox is highly rated. Salanoa is going away in this emerging trip, but they may struggle. Like Archer may be Munster's number 1 tight head, so that might struggle, mean that they find it hard to get games. Whereas if Marty can start ahead of Tamangala every week, and just get some game time. He's had a lot of niggles as well, so I'd love to see Marty get 5 or 6 games in a row. And I think if he does, and he shows what he can do, I think it'd be foolhardy of Ireland not to consider him to be the 3rd choice tight head for Six Nations or a World Cup.
Yeah, I certainly think he could be doing a lot worse. But look, that's my 2 cents on it. We'll move on from that. And before we finish up, I do want to bring up just the controversial all-round Bledisloe game last week between New Zealand and Australia. So, Birch, I heard you during the week giving your thoughts on the ending and why you thought Matthew Raynal was absolutely well within his rights to be turning over that Australian penalty and giving New Zealand the scrum for the time wasting. Ian, interested to hear your thoughts as an out half. You're standing there a minute to go in a match. You're under the pump. You get a penalty 5-10 meters out from your own try line. Are you trying to milk that clock? Are you listening to Matthew Raynal?
Well, I think you are trying to milk the clock, but once again, you have to listen to the ref, and you can actually see from one angle, right? It's looking at Bernard Foley, and you can see the two of his own players in the background screaming at him, "Kick it, kick it, kick it." So when even your own players are saying, "Come on," like I think he knew what he was kind of doing. So I think Renault was completely right, and I think it was good for him to do. In fairness, it's a big call to make, and fair play to him for making it. And you can even see after the match, he says sorry to Nick White. He goes, "Listen, I'm sorry, but they're the rules." And he tried to apologize, but then he didn't back down. He stick to his guns, and I thought it was great. And maybe it's something that the game needs. Like I know in those closing periods, if a team is trying to wind down the clock and there's a scrum, they reset, and there's like 2 minutes gone off the clock. So maybe it is something that the ref can do. It's like turn off the clock until it's set, until the ball's in, then it's time back on. And that's what Renaud was trying to say. The minute I say time is back on, Foley, we want you to kick it, and he didn't kick it, and probably it cost him the game.
It's a good example, Birch, of the effectiveness of us being able to hear the referee out on the pitch, because we were able to all hear him telling Bernard Foley, "Play now, you play, come on, play." We were also able to hear him say it multiple times during the match to him during that double yellow card period in the first half. So it's, if that referee mic didn't exist, I would say most of us would probably be thinking, why on earth is Matthew Raynal just penalising that now in the 79th minute?
Yeah, no, it gives us really good background to it. And I thought the conversation afterwards was interesting, where he basically,
if you don't think I'm capable of doing this,
he stuck his chest out and said, I have big kahunas. But and look at it, having spent 5 years with French referees, they can make big calls. Their understanding of the rule book might be great, but they have character anyway. So yeah, it was interesting. Now I think Australia just need to suck it up now. They definitely played their part in it, whether they feel they were harshly treated or not. They gave him ample opportunity to punish them, and he did. So the rugby championship this year, it's so up and down. It's very exciting to watch, but I'll tell you what, I don't think there's a year out from World Cup. I don't think it's ever been as even in terms of 7 or 8 teams who potentially could win it, and very little between them.
Yeah, and just one little bit then that just cropped up overnight, Birch, around Australia as well, is I see Darcy Swain obviously has his sighting hearing pretty much going on right now. So he's going to find out in the next few hours whether or not he's picking up a suspension for that fairly awful, I don't even want to call it a tackle on Quinn Tupia. But I found it interesting, Birch, to see he's been included on Australia A's 3-game series against Japan in October. Look, it just seems to me that is a pretty cynical attempt to just time waste effectively, which is what they were accused of doing last week.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, the Aussies at the moment feel everyone's against them. And I think that it's poor form for them. It's pretty obvious what they're trying to do. But look at everybody, all unions, all teams try and push the laws to the absolute limit. And that's just the way the game has gone, unfortunately. And that honor and respect isn't as probably as strong as it used to be. So probably something World Rugby just need to try and grab a hold of, because it become a little bit farcical if we see letters in about results and things like that to the World Rugby, when the evidence is that the referee, I certainly feel he was right.
Yeah, certainly was. Well, guys, we'll finish up there, and I'm sure we'll be speaking to you all very, very soon. So games this weekend, we get Leinster against Benetton Friday night. We have Ulster away to the Scarlets on Saturday, as well as Stormers against Connacht. That game is on RT2, as is Dragons against Munster this Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock on RT2. So Bernard and Ian Keatley, thanks a million for joining us. Ian, if we're not speaking to you before the season starts, good luck in Division 2A this season, except in the games against Old Crescent. I am only human after all. But we hope you've a good season.
If it's going well, you'll hear about it on social media.
Yeah, look, we need more Limerick clubs back in the higher tiers of back in Division 1B and 1A as well. All right.
Exactly.
Cheers, guys. Thanks again.